Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show.
It's a more subdued intro than usual.
Yeah, my name is Darryl Grove. I'm lacking the peppiness in the intro, but I'm joined by a man who's always there for me when I need him. In my hour of need, his name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. I hope by being there you mean ranting at the English defense and midfield and attack. Then yes, I was there for you in your hour of need.
Joined me in yelling.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
So, no need for a spoiler alert.
No.
The World Cup semi-final finished England 1, Croatia 2, AET.
Yep.
Croatia are going to the World Cup final.
And well done to Croatia. I think it was deserved on the day. I wasn't sure I felt that way at the end of regulation. It felt like they controlled the game a bit more, but it did seem like England had more chances early on. I'm not sure I believe that anymore.
Yeah, after a rewatch, we had an emotional first watch and a less emotional rewatch.
Yeah.
Not devoid, but less emotional rewatch. Figuring out how this game, how all the pieces fit together. And we think Croatia essentially got things a lot more right than England did. I think we'll get deeper into that later in the show.
I agree with that. And I would already backtrack what I said to go back to quote Marlowe from The Wire. I think it's Marlowe. Deserve got nothing to do with it. That might be Snoop. But either way, that is how I feel. I hate the post-match debate of they didn't deserve to win. They didn't deserve it. If you won, you won. It doesn't really matter one way or the other.
Here's the thing. Croatia aren't deserving World Cup finalists because they have such a small population and they're plucky. They're deserving World Cup finalists because they managed this game better than England. Their tactics were smarter and more flexible than England's. Their big performers like Luka Modric were able to control the game in very intelligent ways like England. It really showed that Modric is 32 and, say, Dele Alli, Jesse Lingard, Jordan Henderson are not past 30, I don't believe. I've just realised I don't know Jordan Henderson's age, but he's not. You wouldn't call him a veteran now. Yeah.
I mean, well, Henderson I might call a veteran, but I take your point.
Yeah.
But I would say this was the first time, surprisingly, that we had to switch to the ambient crowd noise because in those final few minutes, I liked John Strong, I liked Stu Holden. I couldn't handle that sort of narrative creation of smallest country, blah, blah, blah. It's like there are 10 minutes left in a World Cup semifinal, gentlemen.
You hit mute as soon as Croatia's population size was mentioned.
It felt like that was a stat that had been waiting to build that underdog heroic narrative. And it's true, very much so. Very much the underdog, dark horses coming into this tournament. But in that moment, there's still a game being fought for. Let's focus on the drama of the game and not so much the narrative off the field.
So very tense in our office.
Yes.
As you said, England maybe, even though they took the early lead through that Kieran Trippier free kick, we'll maybe break that down later. And it felt like they had more chances after that. It wasn't really the case, right? No. England did not get this even half as right as we think.
No, and I think that's why at the end, rather than feel a sense of, obviously, if they'd won, it would be elation. If they had been beaten to the death or lost on penalties, I think we both would have been a little bit more sad. And what I found myself at the end of that game, and then especially after reviewing, was more frustrated, and specifically frustrated by England. Because while it is a credit to Croatia that they went out and fought, came back from behind, especially with how many minutes they've played, and I don't want this to come across as oh, you guys are just going to blame England and not give Croatia credit. But I do think that
Croatia outthought them.
Certainly true.
Outthought and outfought.
But my frustration came in those final few minutes when it felt like England, similar to Belgium against France, we didn't really see them go all out, throw the kitchen sink in there, really, really going for it. In the end, it felt like the few chances England got after Croatia scored were almost fluky and against the run of play. And I get that they were a man down for a large stretch of that segment.
Oh, because Trippier was off with his injury.
But it's still that's all the more reason to really just go for it, because sitting back and trying to build patiently, it's not going to work, especially not with 10 men.
All right, so this is backwards chronology, but I think if we're talking emotions at the top of the show, then the frustration of the last 10 minutes or so as England were chasing the game is maybe where to start.
Sure.
I don't understand why England didn't do a Jose Mourinho, send your centre-backs forward, aim the long balls at them. What they did instead was try to build out of the back quite slowly. They ended up passing it back to Jordan Pickford, and then someone would desperately not aim it into the box forward, would play it forward in a way that didn't even get into the Croatian box. And then Croatia would clear and probably hit England on the counter anyway. So you may as well have just gambled all the dice.
And
that's not how dice work.
Compounds it again. That's fine. You gamble the dice. I knew what you meant.
Rolled. That's what I meant.
But the thing that is especially confusing confusing to me is that if you were Spain playing against Russia and you're moving the ball and moving the ball and moving the ball and moving the ball, I understand why maybe there would be an emotional block against final few minutes, just hoof it long, let's get it in the box, let's cause some problems, let's play direct.
So against your DNA to ever do that.
But England had been playing direct from the first minute, and especially after they scored that first goal.
Yeah.
It was a lot of direct play looking for counterattacks, but it wasn't much linked counterattack. It was kick it long and have Raheem Sterling run onto it, kick it long and have Harry Kane try to knock it down.
That's weird, right? Why were England doing that when they haven't done that this whole tournament? They've been the team that would play the ball out of the back, John Stones to Henderson to Ali to Lingard, then Sterling connects, then we build something like that.
Yeah.
Then we win a set piece and England scores on a set piece. But, you know what I mean? Like, there was always some intricate play beforehand.
Yeah.
Why so little of that today?
But I would say even, like, we can get to that later, but what I'd like to finalize that last point was that, like, so then I don't get why in those final few minutes they weren't doing that. They weren't kicking it long.
Oh, I see, yeah.
It wasn't that Spain thing of like, oh, we haven't done this before. We don't want to, like shift from our game plan. It felt like England shifted into a more cautious approach at a time when they needed to be more direct and bold. And
a more ball retention approach when now was the time to get it forward. And they got it the wrong way around.
Yeah, they did, I think. And it's evidence, like, I know this is a minor nitpicky thing, but like we had a few people point this out on Twitter. In that final free kick, like, get Jordan Pickford in there. Get everybody in the box. Like, why not really throw everything at it? And the fact that he was kind of standing near midfield looking frustrated, like, it's worth going for in that final couple seconds, because if you lose 3-1, you know, ask Germany, you're still eliminated. It doesn't really matter one way or the other.
Here's the other thing. I said before this game, I said yesterday and the day before that I'm still proud as an England fan, still proud of this England team.
Sure.
Haven't felt this way in a long time. There's a lot to be proud of. But that doesn't mean, and I still believe that, it doesn't mean we can't pick some rather large nits in terms of what happened in this game, because this is where we found out the limits of this England team. One thing I would say is we have praised England's set pieces all the way, but mostly we've been praising them because other teams haven't been able to deal with the stack of six and they burst in different directions and it ends up on a Maguire head or a Stones head or a Kane head. This time it really didn't happen, did it? There was one John Stones header that Vrsaljko cleared off the line. Other than that, I think Croatia went for a zonal marking system and pretty much got enough of a challenge or straight up won every set-piece ball served into the box.
Maguire had one in the first half, inside the first 10 or 15 minutes, that bounced wide. But outside of that, I would totally agree with you. And I think it's because we spotted it, I think at the time, but then went back and rewatched and confirmed that basically England were aiming for the penalty spot. Yep. And it kind of wasn't like necessarily Maguire or Stones or whomever. It was just, we're going to put it in that spot. Somebody will be there. Everybody else is causing confusion. And I think the difference is that previously teams had bought the confusion. They thought it was, it's going to be all these design things. We'll run this guy, we'll track this guy. And because you're focused on all the individual parts, you lose that one key thing, which is they're putting it into the same spot. Someone's going to win that header. Yep. And this time, very much the opposite. It felt like Croatia were sort of like, you guys can make all the runs you want. We're going to defend the penalty spot. And they kept winning the ball there.
So is the decision to go all in on zonal marking on the corners for Croatia is maybe what worked out for them today, because if you don't go man, you're not being confused by chasing people left and right. You're just, all right, it's coming roughly penalty area. Sorry, definitely penalty area. Yep. It's coming roughly penalty spot. We're definitely just going to go and win this ball. I don't care if Maguire runs left, right, or whatever. If I'm being
totally honest, I would say I don't think I paid enough attention to the set pieces to say, like, yes, zonal marking absolutely worked in this game. Like, you could see they did this and it worked this way. But I would say the fact that England did not look very threatening on those set pieces and Croatia were using a zone, if you add those two together, it means, the zone worked. And you got to give it a little bit of credit, because I am not one to give zonal marking credit, but here I think it worked to their advantage.
But I think didn't buy the confusion is the correct term. And then the flip side is...
Wait, can I say one thing? I'm not buying the confusion, if you don't mind?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. There was even the one set piece, I think in the first half, when Kyle Walker did a bit of distraction because Luka Modric was standing maybe a foot in front of where that line had been sprayed. He walks up, but the whistle's already been blown. So England can take it whenever they want. And he is definitely trying to get Modric to back up, but have everybody else think, okay, we're going to take a second for everything to reset. And as he's talking to the ref and trying to get Modric to back up, the free kick is taken. But Croatia are more or less ready for it. They're kind of all tuned into, they're going to try some stuff, and I think Croatia were ready to defend that stuff. Verbose as I can be.
Well, here's a way of putting it. After 6 games, this is the 6th game, right? England have been running mostly the same set plays. I think at some point a good coach and a good staff, with time to prepare for a semi-final, you have time to come up with answers.
I think so, yeah.
Because even England, it sounds like I'm complaining about the stuff that I was very up on at the start of the tournament, but say from kickoff, England always drop it back to John Stones, overload the right-hand side, aim for Harry Kane and win some knockdowns. Croatia were ready for that this time because England have done it 6 games in a row, got figured out.
Yeah, I think so.
So predictable is maybe the word I'm going with.
Indeed, and especially so because in my mind, if you're Croatia, you've played at least 30 minutes more. Like you've definitely had to work a lot harder or run a greater distance. Look at that Russia game. We know how much ground Russia has covered.
4 hours plus penalty kick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like if you're England, you've got to think these gentlemen are tired. We're going to try to move the ball around and frustrate them and force them to run a lot. But I would also say that like if you are Croatia and you're tired in training, you can work on set pieces and you can work on set piece defending. It's not nearly the type of strenuous activity as, say, defend the counterattack. If they're breaking, let's see how we transition back. Like, so it does feel like it's a thing that Croatia could prepare for, and it doesn't seem like England like adjusted their approach enough to cause problems.
Okay, that sounds right to me. Okay, before we dig into the details of the goals and their tactics and what Croatia got right, today's show is sponsored by Away Days, one of our favourite Total Soccer Show sponsors, awaydaysfootball.com. Away Days is an independent soccer clothing brand based out of Boston. They create their own clothes with their excellent Soccer Ball plus Globe brand on it. Couldn't be better for a World Cup year or soccer of all time. They also do the wonderful mystery kit. How does a mystery kit work, Taylor?
You give them your money. More on that later on.
$25 minus the Total Soccer Show discount.
Indeed. They send you a jersey from any club around the world. Not to say that they have every single club in stock, but it's basically a different club than you might otherwise be expecting. So
not necessarily a big club.
Not necessarily.
It's not going to be Arsenal. It's not going to be Real Madrid. Put it that way. Yeah.
But we did it. We both got mystery jerseys sent to us.
We've been talking this up, so it was quite exciting to order it and wait for it to come.
And worth noting, they were labeled. So it wasn't just we each chose one, but Daryl Grove got one. I got one. Mine was Benfica. So it's... I really like it, though, because, number one, it's a nice jersey and it's black, so, slimming. But also...
It's Benfica away, right? Because Benfica are normally red at home. Yeah.
Yes, it is. And I like it because Keaton Parks, can't go wrong. But it's also because while Benfica are, I would say, a bigger team, they're in the Champions League regularly, they're challenging for the Portuguese League regularly, it's still not a team that I would say I have that much familiarity with. Like, I know there's an eagle theoretically involved in there.
There's definitely an eagle.
That's what I've got there.
They fly it around before the game sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I like... It's another reason to now pay attention to a team that I maybe otherwise wouldn't pay attention to. I think it works really well.
Here's what I like about it is you can be a hipster without making a very consciously hipster choice.
True.
You don't have to go to a store and be like, what's the most obscure jersey I can buy from this store?
Yeah.
Mystery Kit will just give you a mystery jersey. So it's like all the coolness of being a hipster without the guilt of making a consciously hipster pick.
Yeah, and I would say, I like that. And I would say, though, that like, I thought this would be the case, but now having the jersey, I think it is that like it's also an easy way to get into a league. It really is for me that like I wouldn't necessarily.
I think Keaton Parks did it for you already.
I mean, yeah, he was there, but it's not a league that I would have necessarely like. What are Benfica doing this weekend? Yeah. But I might give it an extra look now.
The Portuguese Liga, just in case anybody didn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got Real Oviedo,
you did.
Which I believe is a fan-owned Spanish team. I know Sid Lowe of The Guardian sometimes is a fan. So I was quite proud of my Real Oviedo jersey. It's also, luckily, just a good fit. I'm going to wear it because I'm going to have a little spell of not wearing my England kit, I think.
Oh, yeah? You're gonna hide that one?
No, I'm still proud. Still proud.
Okay.
If you would like to get yourself a mystery kit or any Away Days Football branded clothing, go to awaydaysfootball.com. Use the TSS discount code, which is TSS, 3 letters, TSS, for 15% off at awaydaysfootball.com.
Thank you to Away Days for sponsoring today's program. I genuinely was not certain if Diego was throwing to me for the promo code or not, so I was waiting. It worked out well.
It was an audio ellipsis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, so we promised some tactics.
Sure.
Okay, here's the thing. I mentioned predictable for England. England did the 3-1-4-2 with the exact same personnel that I would have put all the money I had, which isn't that much, but I'd have put it all on this England starting 11. 3-1-4-2 in possession, always 2 strikers, always 3 centre-backs. 5-3-2 without the ball, and I think it's the 5-3-2 that Croatia figured out.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I would add, before we get too deep into tactics, that like...
is our head just above the weeds right now?
No, it's more so that like I'm keenly aware of the fact that if this had gone the other way and England won 2-1, we would be praising England more for kind of the same things.
True, but that's not what happened.
But I like to think that we would still be critical of some of their approach. And so what I mean to say is I don't necessarily want it to come across as England lost, and so now we're going to rant about England because that's what you do.
I'd say it's more England lost and here's why.
Yeah, it's England lost and here's why. But for me also, there's an element of England lost and here's why, and also here's why they probably shouldn't have lost. And that's not, again, to be disrespectful to Croatia. But
you mean things England could have done to fix the problem?
Yes, exactly. And I don't think they did. I don't think England in this game were reactive enough or made enough changes, and we can get to that now.
So what would you call Croatia's shape?
I would say it was a 4-1-4-1 theoretically.
So Mandzukic as the one striker and Brozovic as the one defensive midfielder. I agree with that, but it was more flexible.
It was indeed because, and I think you were the first one to spot this, at least in our little viewing group, that what I think was especially effective about what Croatia did is that when they were defending or especially trying to see out the game or see out the 1-1 as regulation expired, they dropped into much more of a 4-3-2-1.
Yes, that makes sense to me. So you had the four defenders, right back, two centre-backs and left-back, quite narrow. So they really formed almost like four centre-backs, sort of.
Yep.
Brozovic in front of them. But then Rebic, the right winger, and Perisic, the left winger, would be level with Brozovic, deeper than the other central midfielders, and almost like extra wing-backs. So that was really covered. And then Modric and Rakitic ahead of them, but central. And then Mandzukic up there, drifting left and right as well, but up there on his own. It really didn't give England any space to try and get down the wings at all.
And it's how they solved the problem that we didn't know how they could solve, which was basically if you focus too much on Jordan Henderson, then you leave space behind for Dele Alli and Jesse Lingard. I always for Jesse Lingard for some reason. But then if you sit too far deep to try to contain those two, you give too much space to Jordan Henderson. And what I think they did that was really smart was they brought those two wingers back into almost wing-back shape, maybe in Croatia.
Rebic and Perisic.
So then suddenly those channels aren't nearly as on as they might seem, and so then England stay back a little bit more, but you keep Modric and Rakitic far forward, and I think that especially was the key in my opinion, because then if Croatia are able to win the ball back, there are two outlets with Mandzukic ahead of them. It's not Modric and Rakitic dropping all the way deep and shielding the defense, and then when you win the ball back, it's basically we got to hoof it long to the channels, which is kind of what England want you to do. It's we can turn and play it forward, and we've got two of the best midfielders in the world waiting to combine to play it into one of the most underrated forwards around.
Still? Mm-hmm. I guess he still is, right?
I would say so.
He's about to play in a World Cup final, but yes.
Yeah, weird, right?
In the other direction, here's the worst part of the England setup to me. When they're defending in that back five with three central midfielders, the idea is if you come down Ashley Young's side, so Croatia's right, Ashley Young's on the left, normally he would pop out to meet the winger, and then England still have a back four sitting back in a back four and three central midfielders lateral to Ashley Young. So you essentially have a 4-4 slightly staggered, right?
That's what it should be. Yeah,
that's what it should be. That's what it has been. That's what's worked. What Croatia did is doubled up down that flank, right? So let's say it's Ashley Young's side. It's Rebic would be all the way down there on Ashley Young, and then Vrsaljko, the right back, would come and...
who we did not think would play, and I was genuinely surprised to see him start, but he looked fine.
He had a knee problem, right? But I assume he took some painkillers, perfectly legal. It's going to cause damage, but he got through a World Cup semi-final. It definitely worked. He got an assist on one of the goals.
And then a goal line clearance.
He did do
Probably
that as
good
well.
He was there.
But then Vrsaljko would overload that side. So Ashley Young's already busy with Rebic, then one of England's three central midfielders has to sprint all the way to the wing to try and close down Vrsaljko, and then you're left with just two centre midfielders, and that's too few people to cover that much space when Luka Modric and even Rakitic are on the roam. And that is the key to Croatia's victory.
And I would say it was the key, especially because that's almost, with all that said, that's still, to continue the boxing analogy that I think loosely fits, that's still like the jab that sets up the big punch. Because there, you're doing that to, as you said, you keep Ashley Young penned back, you keep the center backs focused on that right side, if we're continuing that one.
Centre mids or centre back?
Center backs, but then also the center mid slide over, as you said. So basically everybody shifts over, and that's what Croatia want, because you kind of pull everybody out of position, you make them get a little bit stretched, and then more often than not, it was either on a direct ball all the way across the field, or it was a quick swing from right side to center to left side, and now England are exposed. And then when they try to transition back, that's the ball into the box from Croatia.
That's it, and you just described both Croatia goals.
That's telling.
Right?
Yep.
So if you picture the Perisic goal, it is a switch by Rakitic from the left to the right. Vrsaljko is overlapping. Rebic has pinned Ashley Young back. It is.
And in that case, it goes right, left, back to the right side, and then the cross comes in.
Oh, and I can't remember, is it Lingard or Ali? It's Ali.
Ali.
Has to try and get over to close down Vrsaljko. For me, he doesn't quite sprint fast enough. I think he's tired because he's made a recovery run because he's one of three midfielders covering a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Doesn't get there in time to prevent Vrsaljko, the right back, having so much time that he can do that thing when you know you've got time when you can put your foot on top of the ball, roll it ahead of you, then have a little jog up and send your cross in.
I would agree.
That's dangerous.
100%. I do think that like if a player does a thing consistently, we've talked about this before, then I tend to not believe that it's just like fatigue or laziness. Not that you were saying it was lazy, but I don't think it's either one of those.
You'd never accuse Dele Alli of that.
No, but I think it was England sort of falling back into, like their fallback plan was, look, it's okay if they cross, just put them under a little bit of pressure, don't let them get by you and have a free cross. And so I think Dele Alli is justified in the energy that he exerts because he has already like drifted on a jog 30 yards inside to cover the space, as you said, when the ball goes out to Croatia's left. He's come inside, he's done what he needs to do, but when it's switched all the way to that right-hand side, now I think it's basically, okay, this is a situation where I just need to apply light pressure, let him know someone's there, and maybe that's enough, except that as we were talking about, when England shift all over to England's right side, now they have to shift back to the left side, and then the cross comes in, they're in transition. And
at some point, it's just a weakness in the shape. That it's three men trying to cover the entire width of the field. It's just not possible.
It's not. But if you the say right center back for England have drifted over like central because the ball's on your left, Croatia's right, but then they switched it back. Now you're switching back over, then they switch it again, then they cross it in. You're sort of increasingly spread out from where you want to be because of that movement from Croatia. So even though Dele Alli, I think, is technically doing what he's been told to do of light pressure, don't let him get by you and have an open cross, it's slightly contested. The problem is that everybody behind him is also transitioning and trying to find space.
It's not all Dele Alli.
No.
It's a systemic failure, but caused by the switch and the switch
100%,
and the switch, right?
Yeah.
Because Perisic is with Kieran Trippier.
Yep.
Because Perisic is the left winger. Just as Rebic has Young pinned back, Perisic has Trippier pinned back. But then he sprints from behind Trippier, who thinks he's got him, in behind the right centre-back, Kyle Walker, and gets there first. I am pretty confident Kyle Walker doesn't know Perisic is coming.
I don't think he does.
Because that's why you see Walker try to do essentially a diving header clearance, as if there was no pressure from anyone else. And that's why Perisic is able to get his foot across and get there first.
And I agree, because usually if you said, like, oh, he's going for the diving header, it's because, like, he is frantically trying to beat somebody. But I think in that moment, it's Kyle Walker thinking, this is the best way for me to get power behind a header to get it clear, not, uh-oh, I'm under distress. And I think you're absolutely right, he doesn't know it's coming, because in the final, like, reverse angle slow-mo replay, you can see Kieran Trippier frantically screaming that there's a player coming. I'm assuming it's man on, but at that point, it's too late for Kyle Walker. Perisic gets position, maybe gets a high boot, and again, maybe that's where if Kyle Walker doesn't go for the diving header, then he hasn't lowered his head.
I think it just looks like a high boot because Walker's going for the diving header. You know what I'm saying? It's more like waist height. And it just looks worse because Walker's face is
I think it's higher than you think it is. I think it's up like around like the lower pectorals, maybe.
Can we get this call back?
I mean, that's what I'm saying is I think if Kyle Walker doesn't leave his feet and like thus lower himself to go for the diving header, then in that situation it looks like, oh, he's going for a diving header. He's going to be lower to the ground. So yeah, it's not a high foot. Whereas if he'd stayed upright and maybe tried to chest it, I'm not saying that would have helped at all, but at least it maybe would have looked more like a high kick.
Or maybe he could have cleared it with his left foot.
Or that.
All right, so then Croatia's second goal in extra time is not identical, but very, very similar, but coming from the left flank, right? Yep. So Perisic has pinned back his fullback. The ball is swung through midfield and out to the left back. Is it Strinic, or has he been replaced at this point by Prijovic?
Pivovic? I'm not sure.
That's definitely what I said.
Yeah, I think he's been replaced at that point, but either way, it's their left back.
So I think it's Pivovic, and he puts in. He's free to put in a cross because the same thing, this time it's Jesse Lingard trying to get over there, but because the ball has come from the other side, it's too far of a gap for him to close. So Prijovic has enough time to put his foot on it, send a cross in.
I think you're combining him with the Serbian attacker who got the yellow card.
But
either
correct.
way.
Number 22. So he puts the cross in. Yeah. It's not a great cross this time.
And this is where I would say this goal, I think, is more about England's fatigue and their sort of lack of responsiveness than it is Croatia executing that game plan perfectly because, as you said, it's a bad cross.
It is a bad cross.
You can see that because Mario Mandzukic hangs his head and gets sad.
He does. But before we get into this goal, I just want to underline the fact that Croatia were able to send fullbacks forward on both sides and get enough space to cross the ball because England only have 3 centre midfielders and the wing-backs are pinned back in a flat back 5, which is not always really what you want. All right, so Kyle Walker goes to clear this ball. We sort of disagree about this, right? We had a disagreement in studio. I think if he just goes left-footed, he clears this comfortably. I think he does a weird pivot and tries to use the outside of his right foot, and that's why he spoons it almost straight up in the air. And then Trippier is left trying to challenge Perisic in the air, which is never what you want Trippier doing.
No, but I would agree that he takes an unorthodox approach, but I would disagree that like it's obviously the wrong choice or he's obviously neglected to use his left foot to use his right, because I think in that moment it's really difficult when you watch like slow-mo to think like, oh, obviously he could have done this. But in that moment when that ball is coming in, I think if you're the defender, you've kind of got to trust what feels the most natural.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I like maybe it was that he didn't want to use his left foot, but I'm also equally inclined to believe that it was just him thinking, oh, like I'm already leaning on my left foot, so to get myself to like in a position where I can use that left foot to swing around to actually kick the ball, I'm not going to have the time. I just got to go with what I can.
Agree to disagree.
Fair enough.
And I'm a Kyle Walker fan as well, but agree to disagree on that. So the ball pops up in the air. Perisic does a very smart thing to beat Trippier to the ball in the air, which is just the classic hip check with his butt. Just gives Trippier a little knock and then wins the ball in the air, wins that header down. Mario Mandzukic sneaks in behind John Stones. He's on the end of it. Quick strike beyond Jordan Pickford. 2-1 to Croatia with 12 minutes to go. England never come back from it.
Yeah. And I would say, though, that like a lot of what you've just described there, to me, speaks to how fatigued England were, which is, again, telling, given that like the amount of minutes, the amount of mileage that Croatia have covered, that Croatia looked the fresher of the two teams on the day.
Yeah, because even when Walker does like misclear that ball, you do see all the England players don't say, oh, we should push out and make sure we win this. They almost stop and take a breath because there's at least 1 or 2 seconds of the ball not being in the box.
Yeah.
And I think that is at least partly the mistake. And you see, you mentioned Mandzukic's head goes down because the cross was not that good. It's only down for half a second and then like he reboots and he's back on.
Yeah, and even then, he reboots, and even in that half second, 3 other Croatia players are closing on this 50-50 ball.
Including Perisic.
They're going for it, whereas the English players, if you watch, they are all walking in a way that I think I said to you, it's as though Kieran Trippier, in their minds, were like 8 feet tall. And they're like, oh, there's no way he loses this header.
Kieran Fellaini Trippier.
but like going back to like what you said about the way Perisic goes about winning this header, it's not even that like Trippier jumps, Perisic like gives him a nudge in midair, and then he jumps. It really is just Perisic gets better position, kind of bodies off Trippier, and then jumps over him to win the header. And I think it's just that lack of like immediate response from England and the fact that Croatia really were just going for it in those final few minutes. I think that was the difference on the sequence. And I would say Jordan Pickford maybe could have done better. I don't think this was a very good game from him from start to finish. He seemed very emotional. He seemed rattled. There were a couple that happened like off screen where he went for a challenge and then the camera cut away and he would have a word with the Croatian player even if I don't think they had done anything wrong.
Yeah, he didn't need to.
Yeah, and then even on Croatia's equalizer, the ball comes out of the back of the net like as it does when the ball's been well hit, and it kind of spills into the 6-yard box, and a Croatian player like runs through to try to do that, like, I'm going to thump it to the net, which isn't necessary.
The Alan Partridge and another one.
Yeah, but Pickford tries to kick the ball away before that player can do it, and I think the Croatian player ends up getting into it, but like kicks it into the stands. But Pickford, like if he mishits that by a quarter second, he hits that Croatian player, and the way that looks on VAR is a player came near him, he got mad and booted the guy. And then that's a straight red. So like he was very close on a couple of occasions to being too up for the situation.
I have one other problem with Jordan Pickford that I'll get to in a second.
Sure.
I want to stick on the second goal, the winning goal, Mandzukic's goal, because one of the key things here is that Mandzukic, as this ball comes down for Perisic to head it, Mandzukic is being marked by Harry Maguire. He sneaks behind, away from Maguire and behind John Stones. And so it looks like Stones has lost him. I don't think Stones ever knew he was there until the ball was behind Stones and in front of Mandzukic. And I think when we were talking about England's back 5 being pinned back, I think this is a problem with the formation and the way England and Croatia shaped up against each other is Mario Mandzukic, one centre forward, was being taken care of by 3 centre backs. Yeah. Right? John Stones, Harry Maguire, Kyle Walker. Partly, you could argue that Mandzukic is such a threat that you need like 2 people on him at all times and shift in between all 3. But I think you take at least one man out of the rest of the system, which is why England were outnumbered in various other places. And I think if you've got 3 people on one man, you give that one man the opportunity to keep flitting between and in between and getting the sneak on someone like John Stones as he does for the winning goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, agree?
Yeah. I mean, and so again, like it's frustrating as a nominal England fan, as I'm sure it is as a just pure England fan, because it was those little mistakes and switch-offs and lack of communication that led to England being eliminated. At least I think that's a major part of it. Certainly other factors played their part as well.
Oh, should we go all the way back to the 5th minute where Kieran Trippier scores for England? Because in what I thought was evidence of England doing really well in this game were the seeds of England not doing so well in this game. Yep. So the free kick is won by Dele Alli, fouled by Luka Modric, but it comes from England going, diagonal direct down the wing to Kieran Trippier trying to win it in the air against Strinic, who is bigger than him. And Trippier never has a chance. He loses this ball. Strinic heads it down. Ali gets there first and then is fouled by Modric.
I know, it's Lingard picks it up, dribbles inside, plays it to Dele Alli. Dele Alli gets tackled from behind by Modric, and that's...
But it still starts with a direct diagonal England ball that they hope Kieran Trippier wins in the air. It's very, uncontrolled.
It is, but I would say there's still aspects of this that are good because this is Luka Modric having to track back and do defensive work and not be that outlet, and also because he has to track back in such a desperate situation, he concedes that free kick very close to a penalty. If he'd been a couple yards slower, it's a pen. So it is England doing what we thought they needed to do, which is pull Rakitic and Modric back into more defensive positions. Then you don't have as many outlets for Croatia. So it seemed like it was working, but you're right, it still comes about from England basically just thinking, all right, just kick it long and we'll see if something happens.
I mean, basically that, Let's hope we win it in the air. So the free kick, right? Trippier steps up. Yeah. It's a wonderful free kick.
It sure
is a somewhat Beckham-esque free kick. It gets up and down and bends. And our analysis is Subasic essentially doesn't see it until it's too late.
Yeah, because England do a very good job of putting numbers in the wall on either side.
On both teams' entire teams, basically in the wall.
Pretty much. Yeah. So it ends up being this gigantic wall. I think Subasic just can't see it until it's over the wall. And by then, he's always reacting a little bit later than he would like.
Because you never see him even get full stretch, right? Because as he's jumping, I think he's like, it's already beyond me. So great moment for England. But then, here's where I think the game turns in many ways. Directly after, Croatia go long. I think Pickford wins it in the air and then catches it. And then very quickly tries the sidewinder, left-footed, diagonal slice upfield for Raheem Sterling to run in behind Croatia. And it's exciting because he nearly gets there, but he doesn't quite get there. And if that was just one moment, that would be fine. But that's what England kept doing for the rest of the first half. It kept being, let's just hit people on the break fast in behind. And even though my heart rate went up in excitement, I got out of the chair, it was never really on.
No, it wasn't.
That's the England mistake. They never, with a 1-0 lead that they got in the 5th minute, they never attempted to control the game and slow it down. They just kept going fast and direct.
And I think I've heard a few people complain about yesterday's semifinal between France and Belgium, specifically with the idea that in the first couple minutes, it seemed very open. It was Mbappe dribbles at the Belgian defense in the first minute.
He beats Vertonghen after 10 seconds.
But then Belgium come back. They try to do that. Then France do the same. In those first 5 or 10 minutes, it's very end-to-end, very exciting. And then I think both teams recognized, we can't keep this up, and we're leaving ourselves exposed. We got to slow it down. We got to be a bit more tactical and a bit more smart in what we're trying to do.
They did a Ross from Friends.
Yes, exactly.
Downward pressure.
And England needed that, and I don't think they did it. I think it reminded me of this scene in the movie where the kid who's been picked on is fighting the bully, and he gets the one punch in that he didn't see coming, and then from then on it's I got to run away, I got to flee this situation. I don't think England expected to be 1-0 up, and it was almost as though England being 1-0 up sort of motivated Croatia to up their level of energy and up their performance, and England meanwhile I think we're just sort of don't screw this up, guys. And so in the end you don't get them slowing it down and trying to find passes and trying to find options. You get Don't lose the ball in our defensive third. Don't cough it up and risk making a mistake. Just boot it long and make Croatia have to build out of the back. And so then if you're England, you're not getting any rhythm. You're not getting any sort of relief from the kind of consistent pressure from Croatia aside from seconds.
You go direct, you get excitement out of it, but the Croatian keeper, Subasic, gets the ball, then he builds and they attack you and you have to head it away. But then maybe you go direct and Raheem Sterling's almost in, but then Croatia get the ball, they build and attack you. So you end up just having 10 seconds of hope followed by 2 minutes of intense defending.
Yeah.
And that is not sustainable.
No,
right?
and it's especially not sustainable if you're Gareth Southgate and you want to stick with that approach of, look, we're going to try to suck them in and then hit it long and hit them on the break and cause problems. okay, you can do that, but I don't think you can do that with Harry Kane. And that's the other part that I found very surprising as the game went on is Harry Kane, top scorer right now still. We'll see how that plays out. And I think has been very good in this tournament. I don't think was very good today. And I certainly don't think if you are literally trying to chase the game, he is not the player you want on there. It makes far more sense to me to have Raheem Sterling and Marcus Rashford, for example, come on.
If you're doing what you're doing, you may as well have double pace instead of one pacey guy and one Harry Kane who's been reduced to an aerial target, but he's losing every header.
He is,
right?
because I also think...
It was Lovren's revenge.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely put some tackles in. Yeah. They both hit... Kane and Sterling took a couple hits in the first few minutes that I think were probably intentional of a sort of like, this is what you're going to be getting all game, pals.
But on top of it, I agree with that. On top of that, I just think Lovren and Vida pretty much dominated Harry Kane in the air. I haven't seen the stats, but I think they win way, way more than Harry Kane does.
I would bet they win more of the aerial duels, and I would say Croatia, again, we haven't seen the stats, but I bet Croatia destroyed England on ball recoveries. Because it wasn't just that Croatia were beating Harry Kane in the air, it was that they always... It seems like always had players consistently moving to collect that second ball. So even when it seemed like Harry Kane was going to win it and flick it on, Croatia was still there to collect that ball. And now you've got England stretched. Maybe Sterling made a run off thinking that ball being behind it. Now he's stretched, and you've got like the back five, 3 midfielders who are kind of spread out, and then 40 yards, and then those 2 attackers.
Yeah.
There's always going to be those gaps that's going to be problematic.
I would bet if we went and looked at some stats, we would see... we're not rewatching again. No. We would see Brozovic with a lot of ball recoveries. Because I'll bet if Harry Kane even wins one or Lovren knocks it down but doesn't quite know where it's going, I'll bet Brozovic is there hoovering everything up as the great defensive midfielder that he is.
Yeah.
And then just to give extra praise to Croatia, because they're heading to the World Cup final, it's worth noting the thing we talked about with England's 3 centre midfielders being stretched out and all that, I'm sure Luka Modric is a huge part of that. Because he's so great at ball retention, at beating people in tight spaces, and at switching the play with really perfectly weighted and flighted diagonal or lateral lofted balls.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's also...
maybe the best in the world.
This analogy might be a bit much, but like he's also, I don't think this is a spoiler either, but it's the end of one of the Avengers movies where Thanos is like, fine, I'll do it myself, and he gets the Infinity Gauntlet. It felt like...
It's been long enough you can spoil Avengers Infinity War, right?
No, it's not even Infinity War. It's the one before that when it's like the Easter egg at the end of whichever movie. It might have been Thor: The Dark World, where he's like, I'll do it myself. But... it felt like Luka Modric has that moment as well in every game. I think he had it a couple times of like, okay, fine, I'll just do it. And like he will get the ball and beat 6 people and sort of remove Croatia from pressure and put that pressure back on England. And I don't think England had a player who was doing that. I don't think they had anybody in the midfield who was calming it down and possessing the ball and slowing it up, but then also taking on Croatian players at the right time. It felt like it was either 0 or 100% from England and never that like nuanced 99% that Modric brings.
I think before we move on, maybe an exemplar of the problem that England had is Dele Alli, who would always try and make something happen each time he got the ball, right?
Yep.
He'd try and nutmeg someone, or he'd try and move the ball forward, or he'd try and flick it forward. It would never, ever slow down. I think the only guy who looked... even Jordan Henderson was rushing a few passes, right? The only guy to me who looked willing to slow it down was Jesse Lingard. I really think as Jesse Lingard matures, he may be the put the foot on the ball, control the tempo midfielder that England may need going forward.
But going forward, it won't be England in the World Cup final. Sorry, Daryl. Sorry, English listeners. Yeah, that's fine. It's what the matchup that nobody wanted. It's Belgium-England once again in a meaningless game, which I believe we are not going to cover. Maybe we'll talk about it when we do
see what happens. If
World
it's
Cup final review.
We talk about it. Maybe if I was the England and Belgium players, I would maybe persuade FIFA to just replay the videotape of the final group stage game and just tell everybody that was the third place playoff.
Yeah, that works. But for Croatia, I think like there was an article, I think it was in The Guardian, about how they're like excellent improvisers and their background of like they can think on the fly and they don't necessarily need a game plan. I don't go that route. I feel like Croatia had a game plan. They executed it perfectly, but
Dalic really thought this one out.
I think so. But then they do have that individual talent and ability to be able to sort of elevate individual game at a time when it's required. And then I think they have players who believe in themselves. And maybe that sounds cliche, but it's what you need in a big-time tournament. For example, I'm not trying to throw any blame on him because I think he had an okay game, not better or worse than any of his teammates, but does Raheem Sterling hit that ball the way Mario Mandzukic did? Probably not for Croatia's winner. And
neither does Harry Kane today.
No, I mean, exactly. And it's because...
he literally had a similar chance.
He sure did.
Hit it straight at Subasic on the floor.
He missed twice, didn't he? Yeah. But Mandzukic, I think you've got to have that belief, you've got to have that confidence, and it's I hesitate to use the word that starts with an S and ends with Wagger because people don't like it. It's Wagger. But it's what they have.
I was pretending to be confused.
They have that confidence to try stuff that maybe other players wouldn't try. And when you combine that with a smart and informed and disciplined tactical approach, it leads you to a World Cup final.
Oh, okay. So Croatia versus France, World Cup final on Sunday. We'll be back to preview that game on Friday. We'll be back to cover that game on Sunday. Today's show, we're still going to look at maybe what next for England. Just indulge me a little bit in what next for England, because we haven't done that with other teams, but England's a special case.
I'll just be here quietly nodding as you talk for 10 minutes. Is that about the plan?
No, I'm hoping for some input. Today's show is also sponsored by ExpressVPN. With ExpressVPN, you get a virtual private network, keeps your online browsing more secure, but also allows you to get an IP address in other countries. This means you can get a UK IP address. Do you know what TV station they have in the UK, Taylor?
The BBC.
The BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation.
Nailed it. Yeah, so you can, if you are a sympathetic fan of England right now and you want to know what English people are watching, you can use the British login to watch whatever's available on British Netflix, so you can feel connected to your brethren.
So you basically just once you download and install the VPN, it's a little thing that runs in the background of your computer. It tells the internet that you are in the UK. Then you can log in to BBC and you can watch their content.
Yep.
Right now, I mean, I do this just to get some home comfort. It's almost like comfort food from home. If you're feeling similar, you can go to BBC and you can watch, if you use ExpressVPN, you could watch, say, Gavin and Stacey. Have you heard of Gavin and Stacey?
Nope.
So Gavin and Stacey is where James Corden got his start. You know James Corden, right? So James Corden's a character in this rom-com about an English guy and his Welsh girlfriend. And it's about him travelling back and forth between London and Wales. It's a really cute, heartwarming, almost Parks and Rec-ish sitcom. This is me recommending it to you right now. You could also watch Atlanta. If you haven't got a cable hookup in the US, Atlanta is on the iPlayer in the UK via the BBC.
There we are. So, to unlock access to streaming content you want today and find out how you can get 3 months free, go to expressvpn.com/totalsoccershow. That's expressvpn.com/totalsoccershow for 3 months free with a 1-year package.
Once again, that is expressvpn.com/totalsoccershow.
All right, Daryl Grove.
Shall
we look to the future?
To the future. Okay, so once again, I feel like I've complained a lot about this England team. I'm very proud of an England team that went to the World Cup semi-finals with a somewhat inexperienced coach who was formerly the under-21 coach, taking a lot of the players he worked with at under-21 level to the senior team and going and being in the Final Four of the World Cup. But also, the selfish part of
Ned
me...
Stark principle applies here, I think.
Just wants to think that maybe this is the beginning of something as opposed to the end.
Okay.
Right? Because
maybe Ned Stark principle doesn't apply here. I take it back. I retract it.
All the things we've complained about in this game are things that maybe Southgate, who I'm sure will, his contract goes to 2020. Yeah. He's not going to want a different job after this. They're going to keep Gareth Southgate, right? I'm thinking of what things can England do to evolve and challenge in the next 2 years.
Sure.
Yeah?
And actually, I don't want to go too into this one because this was, I believe, your idea. So if I just take it, then I will be stealing. And I don't like thievery. But I will say, unless it's a corporation. But that's a deep cut. I'll get there eventually. So I think what I would have liked to have seen from Gareth Southgate was a little bit of an ability to improvise and adapt. And that's something we've seen from other managers.
Like playing more than just one formation for the whole tournament.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I would love to have seen when England were chasing, maybe he pulls out a different piece of paper and there's a whole different shape on there that will counteract what Croatia have done once Dalic had figured out a way to stretch England all over the place. Yeah.
And it is also the case that when you get into like knockout competitions, if you're doing the same thing every single time, it becomes that much easier to game plan. I mean, look at the set pieces like we talked about.
Yep.
If you vary that a little bit, if instead of didn't they do the one where they played it? No, it was Spain where they played it like on the ground short.
Yes.
But we saw England a couple times in the first round play short corners or try just different little combinations, and it felt like that went away, and they went back to doing the kick into the box.
Do you think they went just high percentage? Like, this thing has worked the most times, so let's just do it the most number of times that we can, and eventually it will pay off.
Yeah, but if you're doing the same things things because they work a lot of the time, eventually people are going to think, oh, this works for them a lot of the time. They're going to keep doing it. Let's figure out how to make it not work a lot of the time. And I think that's what Croatia did. So, yeah, if we could have seen Southgate, like I think you were saying you would have liked to see, when England still had the lead, have Sterling drop in and it becomes like a 5-4-1.
Because we talked a lot about how the midfield three were getting dragged left and right and stretched out too far. But if you just said, okay, instead of being a three, maybe Jesse Lingard, you're the right midfielder. Dele Alli and Jordan Henderson, you're the two central midfielders. Raheem Sterling, instead of staying right up top and looking for balls in behind, which, by the way, is not working, sir, please come back, play left midfield. Then you've got a 5-4-1 that may be capable of defending that lead, right? And then when that for the equalising goal, when that ball goes out to Vasalko and he has all that time to cross, instead of Ali having to cover like half the width of the field to get there, Raheem Sterling's already there. Yeah. Just in front of him, and he can't cross that ball. Right?
Yeah. So I think those little adjustments, specifically pre-planned adjustments, that's something that I think Gareth Southgate could work on to help him improve the squad. And I think also just improve a little bit of the morale or belief if and when England go down in competitive matches to know there is variety, there are other options. Because it did feel like as soon as Croatia equalized, it just looked like the English players were scared. And I've been trying to remember what game it was. Scared is a strong word, but I was trying to remember what game it was when we saw like that, like the team had their chance. I think it was somebody playing Brazil, but it was like they had their moment and they didn't take it. And after that, it felt like you guys are always going to be struggling. Maybe it was the Serbia game, and this felt like that. It felt like England almost were like, oh my gosh, we're ahead. And then when Croatia equalized, it was like, well, there it goes. Like that's the end of that. And it was just strange to me. And it felt like if he had a little bit of variety and flexibility to then change things up, maybe it feels like, oh no, we've still got a chance. We're still fighting for this, as opposed to, well, we've been doing what we're doing and now we're tied. Let's keep doing what we're doing and hopefully it works.
One thing that England never tried and haven't tried since we switched to the 3-1-4-2 is having actual wingers. Right, the width the whole time has come from wing backs. It's come from Ashley Young and from Kieran Trippier or whoever replaced them. But for example, Raheem Sterling, I still think he's had a good tournament despite his struggles in front of goal and some of the criticism he's taken. He's put in some good displays. He is still not well served being part of a front two and a centre forward. Essentially, he is better off as an actual wide winger, which is what he often played for Manchester City. Right, so it wouldn't have been the worst thing for England to switch to just maybe a classic 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3, and then say Sterling and somebody else can start wide and attack from there. Yeah, so that's maybe one other look that England could have gambled with. Experimented with.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to experimentation going forward, I would say, I think you're right. I think Gareth Southgate will continue to be the England manager. I think he should continue to be the England manager, but that can be problematic because if you stick around for another cycle, if you're sticking around for the Euros, there can be that, okay, these guys know what I want to do. These guys know how to execute my game plan, so I'm going to keep calling the same faces. And as we know with the Premier League,
that'll be interesting.
You get those breakout performances. You get those new stars. You get new faces you got to give a look to. And I will be curious to see who moves to that next level in the Premier League with their respective clubs. And if they get rewarded with more playing time, with more looks from England, or is it sort of Southgate sticking with more or less the same group and then adding in one or two substitutes here and there.
The one thing I would say in Southgate's favour that suggests he may do what you're asking for is that after World Cup qualifying was complete, the very next friendly, he called up guys like Kieran Trippier. He called up, I think Maguire was called in at that point. So he definitely had a phase of, right, next phase starts, we're going to bring in some new faces and take a look. So I would hope that he does the same thing again. Maybe guys to look at would be Ryan Sessegnon, who is now in the Premier League with Fulham. See how he starts. He may be, you could have Sessegnon on the left, Sterling on the right. Suddenly you've got all kinds of attacking threat coming in from the wings. Another thing I personally would like is to see Ruben Loftus-Cheek maybe get to start more games, but be more involved in that England midfield. I think he retains the ball not as well as Luka Modric, but more so than, say, Dele Alli.
It's about to be a statement, But,
do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He's in between on the spectrum between those two.
And it feels like whatever he did in the Belgium game, that really was the death of Southgate's confidence in Ruben Loftus-Cheek. Because after that, maybe he got a couple minutes at the very end, but outside of that, no, he did not play. Certainly not to the amount that he had in the first couple games.
And here's what's next for England. Euro 2020 is the next big tournament. That's 2 summers from now. In between, the very next game is the UEFA Nations League. This is where UEFA have taken the concept of friendlies and said no more. They have put national teams into groups of 3 and banded them to be competitive amongst each other. and then you play for points to try and finish top of your group.
Enjoy getting relegated, my friend.
Do you think?
I mean, who's in your group?
Spain.
Yeah.
And Croatia.
Yeah.
England plays Croatia again, I think October or November.
Oh, boy. But first, they're playing a rejuvenated Spain, now coached by Luis Enrique.
Yep, that is what's happening. But I genuinely think, do you remember it used to be that after a World Cup, the Premier League would start. It starts August 10th, by the way. Less than a month away. It starts August 10th.
Does it really?
And then, yeah.
I'm so tired.
And then that first September is a meaningless friendly, and everybody's like, "Oh, we were just getting into the Premier League. Why are we doing this?" And then a bunch of England players say, "Oh, my hamstrings, I can't play." This time round, there is theoretically points on the line in a game against a really high quality opponent. The exciting thing for me is
a key word you just used in there.
No, I know. Well, I'd say that just to assuage people like you who don't believe in the UEFA Nations League. I believe
it's a thing. I don't believe you that all of a sudden everyone is going to think, oh man, I'm so excited for this thing that I don't fully understand.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody jumped on VAR. People love change.
Well, we'll find out in September. And I think, in a weird way, the England-Spain game has a good chance of catching people's attention if marketed correctly, because there is, in England and in at least this side of this office, and I think maybe that side as well, there is a swell of optimism and familiarity and love for this England team. So I'm excited to see them in their next competitive game, to see what they do next.
I was trying to think of what you say when the person says, I love you prematurely. Like, you're swell. Thank you for that, England.
But you take my point, that we get to see them in what should be an actual competitive battle and see what they do next pretty soon, 2 months from now.
Yeah.
All right, so circle it on your calendars. Spain, England, UEFA Nations League.
And I look forward to teasing you about the importance of the UEFA Nations League.
Oh, you know what I'm going to do? When everybody accepts that UEFA Nations League is now one of the top tournaments in the world, I'm going to go through all episodes of the Total Soccer Show where you mocked it, and I'm going to edit them into one supercut of Taylor denigrating the UEFA Nations League.
Nothing you have ever said on the show is less believable than what you just said there.
Because of the effort involved.
There's zero chance you go back and listen. I can barely get you to go back and listen to our predictions from the previous season.
Which kind of based on the idea that some very good software will be invented between now and then.
Sure.
Some transcription software that will help me find it very easily.
It seems like outsourcing, and I don't think that's part of the guarantee.
Yeah. Final thing for England. Harry Kane has 6 goals. Romelu Lukaku has 4 goals. There may be a shootout in the third place.
Mbappe and Griezmann, I think, have 3.
Oh, and they have another game to play.
They sure do.
Well. Yeah,
I doubt either one of them gets a hat trick plus 1, but you never know. Then it goes to assists, right? If Lukaku happens to get 2.
That's the tiebreaker.
No idea where that stands.
So something of a third place playoff preview. I'll bet Lukaku and Kane plus a supporting cast both start in that game.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And Michy Batshuayi is having to do some social media instead.
And I look forward to seeing one of them awkwardly standing on the pitch after the World Cup final to get their silverware.
Oh, is that where you have to receive it? Oh, that won't be great.
Yeah, it's still silverware for an Englishman. It's fine.
Okay. Actual final thing. A reminder. The World Cup Comedy Tour starts a week yesterday, July 17th in Omaha, Nebraska. Go to worldcupcomedytour.com. It's the two of us, Total Soccer Show, on tour with the Cooligans and with Michael Majid and with lots of guests along the way.
Comedy, guests, soccer.
Trivia, chat.
Throwing out talking points.
All right, Taylor Rockwell, I sense that you are at the end of this conversation.
Correct.
So thank you.
We've done slightly under an hour on one game, yeah.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to me today, mostly patiently.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you very much for listening. I'm glad you've been on this England journey with me. We will talk to you again on Friday with our World Cup final preview.